time when now obviously as lecturers or as continuous learners, we have to continuously improve ourselves with regard to whatever we are learning and whatever we are teaching students. So that is what actually got me into considering doing a research like this, because blockchain, even though it's not very famous among the legal professionals, I would say, I think it's fair to say that because we don't use it much, and I think it's in the developing stage as well. It's continuously developing. So what struck me the most was this application of this technology with regard to cryptocurrency. So you know what is meant by cryptocurrency. So it's run in a certain system. So if I may mention few like Ethereum or Bitcoin, I believe it might ring a bell. So this is basically a system that runs without a single administrator, I would say. So if you consider the Sri Lankan monetary system, we have the main player in the monetary system, that is the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which has the power to decide how things would happen in the monetary system, and even including interest rates and everything, money supply. They can decide a lot of matters pertaining to the money supply and related fiscal policy related aspects. So this system basically works in an atmosphere without, I would say, very less or minimal interventions. So that's what fascinated me to learn more about this and how it actually works. So there are a lot of LinkedIn learning platforms as well, through which you'll be able to get a lot of information about how cryptocurrency works and the system behind it. So blockchain, I would like to say that it's basically the empowering component of the cryptocurrency system as well. That is what I would like to recognize it as. So the reason why I wanted to connect this to the land registry operations, I don't think I have to tell fellow attorneys who are here. I have a bit, I would say, I have less experience regarding land registry operations compared to all of you. But whenever you ask someone, what is your experience in the land registry, usually I don't think people would give a good feedback about it. I don't know, what do you think? You have been to the land registry, right? It's nice. It's horrible. So that is the usual perspective that is shared by the most, I would say, easily a majority. Reasons can be diverse. One may be because of the service that we might be getting, and maybe because of the delays, and maybe because of the small formalities that we have to follow to the scratch, and in the failure to do so, the repercussions or the problems that we will have to face. And the other concern is about the possibility of engaging in fraudulent activities. That is also a bit of a problem, because recently also I have got some information that there have been a transaction which was solely based on a forged deed. Like I think the consideration was around 12 million, somewhere like that. So the real owners came to the lawyer's office the day after the transaction took place, but there's nothing that the lawyer could have done as well. So that means fraudulent activities are going on. And we have this very, I would say, bad relationship with paperwork. Whatever you do, paper. Now I remember recently there was a problem regarding the amount, the value of stamps. I think it was like 10 rupees, less than what is expected or required. So through the land registry, a letter was sent by registered post. I think around rupees 100 will be the cost for a registered letter, I believe. And then with that, stamps there and everything. So to get 10 rupees that is owed to the state of Sri Lanka, they have spent, I think, 12 times of it. So that shows a bit of a problem as well. So those are some of the reasons that I thought now just to see whether there's any possibility for us to include technology. But before I start, I believe now, even though in the courts also, with all due respect to the courts, we have various technological components within it that we can use, including the mics and all. I don't think it being used, that you've been in courts recently as well. It's not being used, right? Even though you are asked to speak loud, but still the clients usually, or the witnesses usually don't get the opportunity to use these devices. But there is some positive light as well. I have seen sometimes projectors being used, which is a positive side. There are also the record room is not a place that usually lawyers would want to go with a nice smile in their face. If they go in with a nice smile, they usually come out with a bad grin, I would say. So I think technology, we have a technology undergraduate as well, no, from the computing school. Technology, if it is used properly, I think most of the inconvenience we go through, including possibility of committing fraud, can be restricted to a certain extent. Technology also has glitches. I believe Ethereum network was hacked some time ago and they have lost a lot of money some time ago. So that is also there. But I don't think there's any problem in trying to evaluate the possibility of using technology to our day-to-day activities. That's why I think we are here now. I'm connected through MS Teams and colleagues from Colombo also joining. So those are good things about technology. So those are the main reasons behind the focus area of the research today. So before I start, I have to state that this is still in the developing process. This is an idea, so this will be subjected to a lot of changes. So we have to determine what are the boundaries and the scope of this, and the possibility has to be considered as well. So I have read a number of articles, few articles based on the subject, but there's not much emphasis on the Sri Lankan perspective as well. So these technologies would have their own, I would say, limitations as well. Like, for example, need of processing power and all, which might cause some problems to our country as a state to accommodate to those requirements, because this is very frequently accessed as a service. So those are some of the limitations that I wanted to give you an idea about before I proceed with this aspect as well, right? So before now, since you know the land registry aspects, I don't think I have to give you a good idea about it. That is where all these transactions pertaining to land, when they are registered, you can you'll be able to get the records from that specific institution. So they have a specific storing system as well. But sometimes in my limited experience, I don't have a lot of practical experience as a practitioner, but with the limited exposure I have to the land registry and the processes, I have heard sometimes some of the deeds that have been registered a long time ago, sometimes they are misplaced, sometimes they are destroyed. So there's a question as to whether when we transfer a certain land, whether it's perfectly safe for the buyer or whether there be any contradictory claims in the future. Now, during the apprenticeship period, I remember there was a land we had to check deeds from 1890 somewhere. So this cursive writing was also there, typed ones were not there. So I remember myself and my colleague, we were using a magnifying glass to figure out what was going on. It's like, if I may be a bit more informal, it's like kadayappa. It's very difficult to read. So after doing all the activity, after going through the whole set of deeds very carefully, the part that the client is entitled to is like 1 out of 200 some odd shares. But still it's a claim. So now I know the practice. I don't know, you can educate me on in this regard. Now, nowadays we only look into the past 30 years when we are, checking for the extracts and everything, right? How effective do you think that is? 30 years, do you actually think it's enough? Not enough, right? Because there can be problems, I believe, pedigrees and everything. So that is where you can come in and share your expertise as well, because my expertise in that regard is very low. So that's obviously a problem, right? So that is where I think we can even think, I'm not saying we have to, but we can think the possibility of using this technology to evade these problems. Main problems, I believe, is one is transparency. Second one is fraud. Third one is basically sometimes not being able to access records and everything. So these are three main problems that I have identified with the limited experience that I have regarding land registry operations. Now, with all due respect on all the officers there, I'm not saying they are fraudulent, but we can't change the fact that there are fraudulent activities going on regarding registering land and everything. So when I give you a basic idea with the knowledge I have, as limited as it can be, but I intend to enhance it, then you'll be able to get to know about what kind of technology this is. Now, to explain to you blockchain technology, I think it's better for me to give you an idea about a ledger. Have you ever heard about a ledger? Yeah, you have done accounting, right? For levels, maybe. I know it's some time ago, but you have done. So ledger is basically a place. Have you done accounting? No, accounting. No, you have not, right? Okay. So basically, what you need to understand is the ledger is basically the place where we record our transactions. Right now, there are different types of common ledger and things like that. So all the accounts that you record, they are stored in the ledger. So basically, back in the day, we used to maintain one ledger. No, it's like a very protected kind of a book where you keep it in a specific place. It's like when a Mudalali maintains all the books. he is the only person who has access to it. So there is no chance of tampering with it, but there's always a risk of, sometimes you might misplace it, sometimes the records might be destroyed. Those problems are there. So in blockchain, I have to give you an idea about distributed ledger technology. Now, ledgers, rather than being concentrated on one person, distributed ledger, the ledger is distributed among a set of persons, I would say. You get the idea? So if you are trying to introduce a new record, you can't just do it by yourself. There is a mechanism that needs to be followed for you to ensure that everything is done properly. It's like we all monitor something. So all of us, kind of like a database, yes, you can use it to record data as well. But what happens there is that you can't just make changes as you think, because there are persons with authority, we call them nodes, who have the power to authenticate whatever the change that is going to happen. Now we have another expert from the computing school. I think I can get some assistance, right? So you get the idea. So there, rather than it being maintained, or let's say being concentrated on one person, it's actually distributed among those who are participating in the network. This is how usually Bitcoin and cryptocurrency also works, right? But there are some unique problems behind it, which was settled through different suggestions. Like there was an article written by Satoshi Nakamoto, I think in 2007 or 9, which provided the Bitcoin basis for the system that inspired Bitcoin, right? So yeah, there are some key terms that I can't remember at the time. But when we progress in the discussion later on after the session is over, we'll be able to go through them as well. So that is the main aspect that we have to consider within this blockchain technology. It's not like a centralized system. There is a system, but there are basically persons, we call them nodes, who will be taking part in the authentication process as well. So whatever the record that you want to include, you can't just do it. Every record that you put into the system is connected to the previous record, right? So information is like blocks and they are connected to each other. So that is what inspired me to just consider the possibility of using this technology for land registry requirements. One is you can't change it very easily, right? You can't change it. Other thing is there'll be a continuous record of everything as well. So even though some deeds are missing or something as such, it's still there in the system. So we might be able to go back in time and look at the origins and everything regarding the ownership of a certain piece of land, right? And the most important thing that convinced me to look into this is the security part. There are security flaws in any system, no? Colleagues from the computing department would tell me. But the thing is, I think with what I have read and what I have understood, this appears to be providing a very concrete system that is usable. But as I mentioned to you before, there are some problems with it as well. Now, there are different authentication systems. Now, have you heard about mining when it comes to cryptocurrency? Yeah. So mining is a process where certain persons involved in the authentication process of a certain transaction, which involves solving certain complex mathematical problems. So now this has become kind of a competition as well. There are certain persons or organizations whose main activity is to mine. So they use a lot of processing power. So mining requires a lot of processing power because it involves solving complex mathematical problems. So processing power needs more electricity. More electricity being required means that implies the fact that it can have an impact on climate change as well. So under the current circumstances, we can't disregard that matter as well. And since we need a lot of processing power, there's another question as to whether as a state we can accommodate those requirements as well. So that's why I wanted to tell you before I start this still in the thought process. Your thoughts as researchers would be essentially important to make this practical. Otherwise, this would just be an idea. But even though it's just an idea, still we have tried to see the possibility. So I think that would be a good contribution because these are not discussed a lot. Now, my main area is intellectual property law. Intellectual property law is analyzed in different ways by different individuals. But if you look at law-related papers, you will see rarely blockchain and cryptocurrency are being considered by authors in Sri Lanka. I don't know if you don't agree with me, you can tell me with what I have seen. So that's why I thought that this would be an opportunity for us to do something original rather than just writing about something. So one thing that I heard in one of the conferences is that we need acceptable, proper data and proper research. rather than just writing on something. So that's why I thought that this could be a gap that we will be able to, because we have this nice gift of everyone being in the same staff room and different students with different passions as well. So if we can actually look into these matters, I think we'll be able to come up with an original contribution that can be useful. Did you get the idea? So that is what inspired me. So any questions so far? You can ask. Oh, may I start asking? Yeah. So what do you think about having a system? Are you happy with the existing land registry system? Right. Yeah. So last time I checked, they have tried to introduce this online system where you'll be able to get extracts. Does it work? Ah, yeah. So so it gives an idea about how the land passed from different owners. Ah, so all the aspects are there. Okay, okay. So there also they have registered land and unregistered land, but here we have the other registered. Property law expert. And then the other other aspect, we have different types of systems as well. The beam survey system is a bit different. What is the other one? Beam survey, and we have a number of mechanisms, right? So they are, how you proceed with it is also a bit different. So this is where I am not good at all. So this is where I need your assistance as well. So likewise, systems are also a bit different, but whatever the system it is, the fact that we need records is something that is universally required. So those are the main motivations behind me thinking of this idea. We have to test whether it's feasible or not. That's what we have to do through the research. But this is the basic idea, right? So if I may, so I just reserve the privilege of developing a hypothesis as well. We'll see. Thank you, Nurul. So basically, the hypothesis that we'll be testing is that blockchain technology has the necessary potential that it needs to improve efficiency, security, and transparency. These are the three main aspects that I have discussed. But sometimes, based on the research that we do, these three terms might be a bit too wide. So we might have to focus on one area, maybe, depending on the case. But if there's any possibility, these are the main three areas that I wanted to focus on. Like, if we use blockchain technology in the way that certain authors have suggested, would it improve the efficiency or security and transparency? Transparency is also there. So when you have access, you can see how the land progress through different individuals, because all the information will be connected to each other and you can't change it as well. So transparency is there. But nowadays, if you still, we can say there is some transparency, but my wife tried to explain to me how they record all this, but I couldn't figure it out. Maybe it's my processing power issue. But she showed me this old, what do you say, that the extracts and all. Yeah, it's written, and sometimes sometimes they don't update the record properly. Sometimes the record is in another place. Did you get the idea? So those issues, I believe we will be able to figure out if we use this, but still it's subjected to be tested, which is why this is the hypothesis. So the hypothesis that we'll be looking into, whether we can prove it correct or wrong, is that using blockchain technology has the capacity to improve the efficiency, security, and transparency in land registry operations. So in that way, it has a societal function as well. So sometimes you might think, all right, so what is the legal analysis of this? Now, institutions, the importance of institutions, I believe it's a separate research we have to do. All institutions that are imposed by law are essentially important for a society to function properly. So land registry is also one such institution. Now, if you look at the theoretical basis introduced by John Locke and various other thinkers, since you all have learned jurisprudence, and we have the jurisprudence lecturer here as well. So, even John Locke has identified property as one of the most essential needs of an individual in the natural rights theory. So, as an institution, land registry, even though we don't like going there, I think its functions are very important for a proper society where people's rights will be protected. Yeah, equitable interest, legal interest, different. So equitable interest, yes, that's also important. But legally, what you are entitled to, you should be entitled to, right? So those are the other perspectives that we can consider, but I believe that's a different research. That's for a different research. So this is the hypothesis that will be testing whether it's going to be successful or not. But we'll have to decide the possibility of it as well. 3 elements are there. We might not be able to consider all of them, and sometimes you might not have enough information. So I talked to a few colleagues as well, but most of them, some of them were of the opinion that blockchain is basically developing kind of a technology. It's very difficult to, because I remember I told one of our former colleagues to engage in a process where you create a blockchain in a class. I didn't know at that time that this was that much difficult for someone to create. But my idea was that can you come and do a guest session and give an idea about how to do it? So his idea was that you can't just build a blockchain in 1 or 2 hours. It takes a lot of time and a lot of processes are there. Did you get the idea? So that is another part that we'll have to consider, because you as court professionals, you know that the court system, the individuals who are working there, with all due respect, they are not very much tech oriented, I would say. Now, when you go to record rooms, you see the situation. Sometimes you get the files, and the extra feature you get is years worth of dust. So, and then I think this is not a good thing to say about the system, but I have seen certain situations where some documents are missing from the file as well. That is an ugly truth. So there's nothing that prevents something like that happening here as well. I'm not accusing anyone. You should not accuse if you don't have proper evidence, but there's a possibility. So this, I believe, would be an option for it. So this is what leads to the research objectives and the questions, which again is subjected to change based on how it progresses. This is just a concept only, I would say, that I wanted to share with you through this session. Can you help for the next one? Next. This is work. Right. So these are the questions. I'm sorry, they are not very well drafted. Sorry about the colors. I have a thing with colors. So yeah. So the first one is, before saying there is a problem, we need to understand whether there is a problem or not. Right. So the first question that I thought that we should address before proceeding any further with the research is to see whether there are existing challenges and limitations in the ongoing land registry process, right? In the context of fraud, inefficiency, and lack of transparency. So this is another concern that I have. As I told you before, it looks like it's a bit vague and it's a bit wide in its scope. So if we can consider about transparency only, or inefficiency only, or fraud only, it can be a bit more focused based on what our priorities are. So the first question was to figure out whether there are actually problems, any problems, issues, challenges pertaining to the existing land registry processes, right, in the context of inefficiency, fraud, and transparency. There are many other problems as well, like for example, when the officers there don't accommodate your request, that's also a problem. So that is not something that blockchain alone can figure out. I believe it's a human factor now. So we have an expert in human resource management. You can ask her regarding those matters. But what we need to understand is that, but if we have a proper system, I think we can reduce more interactions with persons as well. It's easier for them and easier for us as well. So for example, recently, with the help of another colleague from Appit, we registered a company through the EROC system. They give us a bit of a hard time, but we never had to interact with anyone. So you put the details, you put the relevant documents there, make the relevant payments. Making payments was a bit difficult, but still not that difficult, such as going there. So everything was done in the online platform, no interactions. Comments were given when we had to make changes. So if they can, now that's a big development, right? So you being lawyers, you know that company registration, everything, you know, a lot of documents are involved. So having the EROC system, the electronic registration system, is actually a good thing. So this could be the same. Now imagine, now sometimes most lawyers don't go to the land registry as well. Sometimes they have to hire other people to go and get the work done. And sometimes when there are small errors, you have to go to the land registry and then you have to make the changes in front of register as well, right? So which is not something that we will, but still again, it's our fault. We have to go there if we make errors. But still, a system like this, if it works, I know my knowledge in the area of blockchain is like surface level, but if we can consider this, I believe it could be an eye opener for the policymakers. I don't know whether they are going to consider it, but I still think it would be good. Next one. Does blockchain technology has capacity to address fraud, inefficiency, lack of transparency in land registry operation? So now here there have been some articles when I just went. There were some articles that stressed on this matter, but as I mentioned to you before, not in the context of Sri Lanka. So I believe the second now. First, we have to identify whether there are any problems in the land registry in the context of these three aspects, or even one aspect according to our research objectives and requirements. And then we have to see whether the solution that we are seeking for can be used as a solution. So in the process of doing that, we'll have to consider the benefits and associated disadvantages as well. Now, disadvantages would be the requirement of processing power, which I believe will be facing problems with. So that is one problem only. Benefits, on the other hand, there are a number of benefits. Not being able to change very easily, not being able to change can sometimes be a problem as well. So because these are subject to changes all the time, people make mistakes, and yeah, when you make a mistake, changing it can be very inconvenient. So that is another thing, because this is a different area, like land registry operations. So we have to consider that, I believe. But please feel free to share anything that you think is necessary to improve it. Next one is, what are the legal and practical implications? So there are different, now when we look at electronic commerce also, there are some unique challenges that we have to face when it comes to doing things in the electronic atmosphere. So we have to see whether there are challenges as such if we are going to use this as well. Now, papers usually, when they are stored, unless otherwise someone takes a photograph and leaks it, it never leaks. But what if there is some sort of a glitch in the system and details of others can be freely obtained? That is also a bit of a problem, right? So now right to privacy in other countries, including right to forgotten, is recognized. But another new development that I didn't include here is the Data Protection Act that was introduced recently. So our former colleague at Rapid, Ms. Ashwini. So Ashwini Natation, I think you can remember. So she is very active in terms of data protection. And also, if you go to your LinkedIn profile, if she's a friend, you'll see a lot of posts, very informative about those things. So do you know about right to be forgotten? Might not be very connected here. Right to be forgotten is when you give your information away to someone, you have the right to ask that person to remove that information, right? Like let's say I'm a pharmaceutical company that delivers pharmaceutical products to your home. When you give me the prescription, so based on the prescription, your name is there, your age is there, other details are there. So with regard to what type of pharmaceutical products you are using, I'll be able to identify what kind of physical health issues you have. So those are personal records that you wouldn't go and share with any other random person. So you should have the right to opt out as well, right? Like if you think that no, this information should not be kept by this person any longer, you have the right to ask that person to remove that information. So those issues are also there. So that is another practical dimension that I believe we will have to consider, even though might not be directly related to this area, but there are unique issues as such in utilizing technological aspects for these operations as well, right? Last one is, can an effective framework for the adoption of blockchain in the land register communications recommended for Sri Lanka? So basically, this is the final one. As a recommendation, if we can recommend what kind of system it could be, right? How can it be implemented? Those are very important aspects, because as I mentioned to you before, when it comes to technology, there is this tendency of current officials in having this pessimistic approach towards technology. So that could be a bit of an issue. Now, since I worked at an NGO for a very short time period, when they try to go, and sometimes one experience was that they have given some computers away. I think I told this in the staff room once. So they have given some computers away for a governmental institute to use for documentation purposes. But after a few months, when some of the agents went there for another commitment, they have seen these computers nicely. They are clean and all, covered with nice polythenes and everything. So when they inquired why is there something wrong? No, it's for protection. So they're not using it under the context of protection. So that is a bit of a problem. And then training, that's another issue as well. Now, I am just giving you a surface level kind of a idea about these technologies. So imagine someone being trained to develop this, manage this, maintain this. So it's a question as to whether we do have the provisions to do that. And the processing power, as I mentioned to you before. So those are obvious challenges. So without considering those challenges, if we are to recommend, this might not have the value. So those challenges will also become a part that we have to consider to provide solutions in that case. That is where I believe our colleagues from the School of Computing can be very helpful, because we don't know how it happens. Now, what I have for teaching, of course, I've learned about it, cryptocurrency, how it works, and some methods, of course, I know. But the mechanics behind it is something that I honestly don't know. But to inform the students, to educate them, the basic level of knowledge that I need with regard to this system and how it works, I know. But how you create, how you maintain, and how you are going to improve it is a matter to the experts. So that is where I believe collaboration can be of utmost importance. So these are the questions. Objectives basically reflects the questions in a different form. So this is basically what I thought would be a good value addition for existing research here, mainly because one reason it's an ongoing issue, and sometimes you might have seen some record rooms. I'm not saying it happens strategically, but sometimes they burn. Burn means like, how are you going to figure out whose land it is? Unless otherwise you have a copy of your video. How can you prove? When you request, they would give you reasons. We can't expect them to give you something that they don't have as well. No? So they might tell you it's not there or it's destroyed, something as such. So how are you to develop any claim over this? That's another issue as well. So we can't say, if you don't use lands, give it away. You can't say that as well. It's a free country. No? So if you want land, you can have it and you can keep it. So just because you are not using it, no one has a right to ask you to sell away your lands as well. So if you look at it, this addresses a series of issues, but it all depends on practicality, which I believe I don't have enough knowledge to evaluate and decide. So I think that's up to our School of Computing colleagues and computing colleagues who are in the business school as well, right? So, right. But anything that you need to add, that is it in terms of what I intend to do. I think I gave you a basic idea about it. Indura can also take part and tell anything. You can also take part in the research. This is for everyone, not it's for the betterment. No, so it's not a matter of taking credit that I did that, he did that, she did that. If you can come up with something meaningful, I think it's a win for everyone, right? So there's no problem in being part of it all, even though we don't like, right? Yes. Anything you need to, right? Okay, that's yeah. So in terms of the output, now these are the main three issues that I have identified that can be present when we proceed with the current system. So if you are using the current system, I believe this is one of the problems. So whatever the system that we build, if it can reduce the risk of any fraud, that is the expectation. Other thing is inefficiency. Obviously, when humans are involved, it's completely based on how they perform their work. No? But if it is in a system and if the system works fine, it saves time and many other resources as well. So that's why I told you considering three aspects could be a bit too wide when we are conducting the research, because if we are focusing on one area, the focus is better. Third aspect is transparency. So basically, whatever the records we have nowadays, now as Netmi mentioned in UK, in her experience, she has seen a system where you can get all the details. Now, what happens now? What happens in land matters is that, so if you want to get information about how you got the land, so we have to trace the origins of ownership of that land. So that I believe is not that transparent as well. I'm not saying that everyone should know everything, but at least if you can insert the deed number, if you have it, and Yes, and you need to know, because we don't know, because as I mentioned to you before you came, a few minutes before you came, I mentioned an example. So we went through few deeds recorded from 18, as I can remember, this was like 7 years ago, 1870s, 80s, 1870s. So those days deeds were handwritten, not printed like these days. So some of the deeds had cursive writing. So myself and my colleague, we had to use magnifying glasses to see like what is written there. So basically, when we came to the current era at that time, like it was like 2019 or 16 maybe. So there, the client's ownership share of the land was 1 share out of 200 something. But still, even though it's insignificant in our eyes, 1 share out of 240 small, you can't say that in law, because whatever the ownership he or she has on the land is still his or her share. You don't know where it is unless otherwise you properly apportion it or allot it. So those are the concerns we have, I think, due to this. In records, human errors are made now. Sometimes I might make a small mistake, and the mistake might go for the next few years as well. At some point, when the lands are being sold or something else, after buying the land, if the problem comes up, that is going to, like, I would say, waste time, courts as well as parties, financial resources. Some may say it's good for lawyers, but lawyers do what they do because problems arise. No? We don't cause problems anywhere. No? We don't make people get divorces. No? When people come to us, we try to help them. That's it. There may be some people who might be engaging in unethical conduct as well. But these are not issues that we create. So if we can come up with a system, that is what I wanted to consider, the possibility of doing that. If it is transparent, less problems. We know how things are done. Now nowadays, even though we say not knowing the law is never an excuse, just because that people don't know every legal rule that is applicable to them. So here also, that's why I mentioned about transparency. If there's a process, how it is done. Nowadays, some people are experts in land registry. Me being a lawyer and notary, even though I don't work, I don't know much about it, right? But I should know. But if we can simply access these matters through a system, and if guidance is provided, and if we can freely access these records without much of a hassle, I believe there's high transparency. High transparency, I believe, reduces any chance of fraud as well. It's because transparency is lacking. Sometimes we don't know what's going on. Now, recently, very recently, 1 month, at least, I believe, few weeks ago, there was a land that was sold for a Herculean amount. I would say around, I think, 10 million to 12 million. All the deeds that were prepared were fraudulent. Seals are there, everything is there, but fraudulent. Buyer, yes, attempts, right? So buyer should be aware. So that is because it's someone's rights that will be affected. Some frauds, we don't know how it happens as well, whether it has a hand inside the authorities or not. Very difficult. I know it's a bit complex, but that is. Hmm.
What I mean is that real requirements are there. No? Real requirements in the sense the computing people, they don't know the real requirements or the real application. So they don't know, then without that idea, the computing people cannot design even an application. Because now without knowing the requirement, so that gap is there. So that as Harsha said, if we can just collaboratively work on this, the computing colleagues can just help in the development part, even with the students. Students are doing good project, even we can give them this as a final year kind of project as well. The real issue what I see here is that requirements, the computing people, they don't know the real requirement, real data that should be considered. So if that part is very clear, of course, this would be good system which we can do and test this thing. Then we can simply test now if there is a system. So that
will it be very complex?
no. Anyhow, as far as I know, if we apply blockchain, this transparency, that thing is inbuilt. It's there. Some free platforms also there. Even our students use this kind of thing with some certain free platform and all. We can develop it, and we can see how far we can like adhere with the real requirement. I mean, legislation wise, like that part, if it is clearly mentioned, like what data has to be considered and what kind of output. Now, for example, the user, as you said, the user input the deed number or something. So what data should be seen? So who has the authority for certain kind of data? Some people may have the authority while the data transfer. Like that, we are having, I mean, nil about that. So that data, if it is clear, it is a feasible system to be done even by our student. So then if the system is there, of course, we can prove this, what you have mentioned, the transparency, fraud, can just show. Even if there is a normal website, as Netmi mentioned, we'll say that another country or our country is having simple website where we can type the code and whatever the data comes. Then compared to such a system, we can say, okay, this kind of attack can be given to this kind of website, but not for this type. Like we can just do a control kind of experiment. Yeah, so it's a feasible thing, but it is not feasible if we are not clear with the requirement, the computer. Yeah. Thanks for the idea.
Thank you. Any further questions? Or suggestions? Thank you very much for the comment. It actually encouraged me to see, because I didn't have a very strong basis as I should have before I came here. But the thing is that the comment that you have shared actually gave a bit more context as to how this can be progressed to the next level. So thank you very much. Right. So any other further questions or suggestions?